You know, ladies and gentlemen, Team Canada 72 was a story of two different conceptions. Initially, when Team Canada was worked on, the WHA was not a factor. However, when the WHA established itself and were signing several NHL players, the organizers of Team Canada, led by that convicted felon Alan Eagleson, ruined it because players like Bobby Hull and Bernie Perron and J.C. Tremblay and Derek Sanderson and Jerry Pinder and a myriad of others weren't even considered. And in their place were a bunch of, shit shovelers and spirit carriers like Talon and Glennie and, Don Ori. Now, here's the deal, ladies and gentlemen. You look at the roster from 772, the ones that were selected and the ones that were kind of the B team. There's no way in the world any of these players should have been replaced. I'm going to give you a myriad of players, and you tell me exactly why they weren't on Team Canada. Well, let's start with the Montreal Canadiens, and the simple fact is, if you picked Rod Gilbert and Gilbert Perreault to play in the squad, and Jocelyn Guévremont, why not Guy LaFleur and Jacques Lemaire and Jacques Laperriere? Well, we know Jacques Laperriere had some family situations going on. I guess his wife, in relation to her fertility concerns, he didn't play. But I think Jacques Lemaire and Guy LaFleur would have done well on the big ice. And another obvious one as well, no longer a Montreal Canadian, but he would have done a lot because he had experience against the Russians. He was back in the NHL, and he was considered at the time the number one money goalie in the history of the NHL. That was Jacques Plante. So one former Montreal Canadian, Jacques Plante, Guy Lafleur, and Jacques Lemaire. So let's look at the Toronto Maple Leafs. This is the obvious one. They picked players like Ellis that knew how to win, and Paul Henderson, although he never won a cup in Toronto, he was a solid player. But what about Normie Ullman and Dave Keon? Dave Keon was pretty well the best defensive player of the last decade. You could drove the Russians nuts, especially on the faceoff. And Normie Ullman, being somebody that played with Detroit, Toronto, and a myriad of squads, he could have been great for a third or fourth line. Now, J.C. Tremblay. You should have allowed the WHA players in for Team Canada. Bobby Hull would be a no-brainer, as well as Derek Sanderson. But what about J.C. Tremblay? Well, J.C. Tremblay was a Stanley Cup winning player, scored a winning goal in '71 against Chicago. He was, he didn't score the winning goal, but he scored the winner against Boston in the first round. J.C. was a great two-way defenseman, could play offense, play defense. Okay, let's look at the Boston Bruins. Derek Sanderson, although no longer with the Bruins, the WHA. Freddie Stanfield, Ken Hodge, Johnny Busick, and Johnny McKenzie. That's five players that could play. You could have had a whole Boston line, and could just leave Aubrey on the side. They should have stuck with 6 or 7 defensemen and try to run with 5 lines and bring them in. So let's look at Team Canada 72. Eddie Johnson could have easily been replaced by Jacques Plante or Bernie Perron if he was allowed. Now, there's no way in the world, ladies and gentlemen, that Bill Goldsworthy was going to do anything but take penalties. He wasn't the better player like he was later on. Obviously, Walt Tkachuk would have been a better fit in that position. Vic Hatfield, again, not very good on the defense. And again, Jacques Lemaire, Guy Lafleur could have took that. Red Berenson getting a little bit too old, might be good as a filler player at the end. Now, Rod Sealing, again, J.C. Tremblay could have took his place. Bill White was solid. And as you go down, Parise, it could have been easily his teammate Jules Drouin. I think that was a good selection. Mickey Redmond, again, why not Danny Grant? Or somebody to that extent a little bit younger. Nick Libet as well. Known goal scorer, former Montreal Canadiens prospect. Now, Don Ori, Jerry Pinder could have easily been better than Don Ori, bringing the international experience to the squad. Now, Dale Talon shouldn't have been there at all. He was too young. You could have had maybe a more experienced defenseman, maybe somebody with Boston. Dion should have been there, but it should have been played more often. Richard Martin, no disagreement here. But Jocelyn Guévremont, a little bit too young, and Brian Glennie just a friggin' sieve most times. So I would throw you this: Jacques Lemaire, Dave Keon, Guy LaFleur, Wal Kachuk, Normie Ullman, almost two full lines. These should have been put in. Bernie Perron and Bobby Hull, a line with I don't know. Maybe Jacques Lemaire or Guy Lafleur on one side. Somebody can finish off the play, and Richard Martin. You never give Richard Martin enough of a chance in the selections. See, hindsight is 2020. There was players that were chosen for the experience. I have no problem with Makita, but to ban the WHA signees just because what Alan Eagleson and Harold Ballard wanted was just terrible. Now, Normie Ullman and Ron Ellis, Henderson, Keon would have brought that good Toronto aesthetic. And I remember Toronto gave Boston fits in the playoffs a couple of years earlier and was still a very solid team. Bernie Perron and again Jacques Plante would have been a great goalie to have, and Jacques would have instructed why not a fourth goalie. I don't understand that at all because you could rotate the backups. I would like to see Jacques Plante start one game in Russia. And you remember this, Esposito gave a couple of cheap goals against the Russians in Russia. Tried and had a bad game 5 against game 4 against them in Canada. And Jacques Lemaire could play defense and offense. You could put Jacques Lemaire, make an all-Canadian line with Cornway, Lemaire, and Mahovlich. So there should have been at least 2 more Montreal Canadiens, at least 2 or 3 more Boston Bruins. Cashman was a good fit. Should have had 2 or a better Ranger player in Kachuk, who was coming on as a player. Even a young Steve Vickers would have been really good. And I would like to see Jules Drouin give a chance because a good playmaker. I think Marcel Dion would have been a nice goal. Maybe put him on the kids line with Martin and Perreault. There's nothing wrong running 6 lines. Everybody has a chance to play. But I think what happened in Montreal, the experience that Jacques Plante would have brought to say, hey, watch out with the Russians. Dryden didn't know how to play against the Russians, although he played against them in '68, him and Stevenson. And ladies and gentlemen, he should have had at least one representative from the Father Bauer system as coach. Like Harry Sinden was okay, but somebody in the more modern one. There was several key Canadian players. Even Fran Huck would have been good as a practice player to give them an idea how to play against the Russians to mimic their style. So 1972, we barely got past. But again, when you think about it, LaFleur, Keon, Lemaire, Ullman, Stanfield, Hodge, Busick, McKenzie. That's 7 players. Look what was in their place. Terrible. So ladies and gentlemen, if you like what you're doing here with our speculative podcast, let us know with a like, comment, subscribe, or share.